Kazuya was a weak, ugly bum who developed mommy issues after she died and left him with a mysterious cloth. After carrying that cloth around like a single mother carrying child support, one day, it turns into a blue-haired baddie, giving him no choice but to start clapping. It all starts when Kazuya is dreaming about a girl, and when he tries to reach for her, he accidentally grabs the melons of his friend, Chisato, which ends with him getting smacked. After school, Kazuya heads to the rooftop to clear his mind. From his bag, he pulls out an obai that belonged to his mother, which keeps appearing in his dreams. However, he tucks the obai back into his bag and gets ready to leave when he sees a random wig on the floor. Suddenly, the wig moves and wraps around his whole body, but before Kazuya can process what kind of BS is happening, the wig yeets him off the rooftop straight to a Travis Scott concert. But just before he hits the ground, his obai bursts out of his bag and saves him. Then it transforms into a hot, blue-haired woman, and Kazuya asks who she is. Instead of answering, she headbutts him for being ungrateful and not thanking her first for the save. A moment later, the host of the animated wig pops up and immediately attacks Kazuya again. But the obai woman blocks the attack by extending her sash. She introduces herself as Kiriha and announces that Kazuya is her property now, which shocks him. When Kazuya mutters that she's probably just an evil spirit, Kiriha gets offended and corrects him, insisting that she's an object spirit and not a mere monster. Kiriha threatens to let the enemy have her freaky ways with him if he doesn't show some respect, and out of desperation, Kazuya agrees to be her servant just to avoid dealing with the hairy female Diddy. With Kazuya safe, Kiriha confronts the enemy. The possessed girl attacks with her hair, but Kiriha dodges them skillfully and counters with a strike from her sash like she's a ninja, which amazes Kazuya and throws the monster around like a ragdoll. She urges the monster to come to her senses, warning her that it's the only way to lessen her punishment. But the girl fights back even harder, and though Kiriha manages to raise a barrier, 2 hairpins slip through and injure Kazuya. This enrages Kiriha. She grabs the possessed girl by the neck and lifts her into the air, preparing to unleash her most powerful move. But just before she attacks, Kazuya shouts for her to stop, and the attack hits the wig instead, shattering the cursed object. With the evil spirit gone, the girl collapses, finally freed. She rests her head on Kazuya's lap, and Kiriha explains that the wig had become corrupted by the girl's intense feelings for him, forming something called the Amasogi. Kazuya is stunned to hear this, and Kiriha informs him that if she had succeeded in capturing him, he would have been forced to satisfy her emotions through freaky activities. Kazuya feels honored that a girl likes her, but to his shock, Kiriha informs him that it's a dude, which turns Kazuya off. Suddenly, Kiriha disappears, and Kazuya gets scolded by a teacher. That night, Kazuya lies in bed, thinking about the mysterious girl who saved him and how she seemed to know him so well. He also realizes that the obai is no longer in his bag. As he drifts off to sleep, he's jolted awake by a nightmare. But when he sits up, he sees Kiriha comfortably sleeping in his bed, and he screams at the sudden plot development. His scream triggers his sister to barge into his room with a frying pan. But Kazuya manages to hide Kiriha and excuses himself to his sister, saying that his gooning session got too intense. After his sister leaves, Kiriha wakes up, and she spins Kazuya around for how she was treated. Then, he tells her that he knows that she is the spirit of his mother's kimono's obai, who, technically, is meant to serve him. But she insists on calling him her servant instead. She gives him a task to buy snacks for her, which she enjoys, and smacks him for forgetting the pudding. Then, he leaves her in his room while he goes to eat dinner with his sister, leaving Kiriha by herself. When he returns, he finds the room completely trashed and no sign of Kiriha, thinking she left. He heads to the bathroom to take a shower. To his shock, he walks in on Kiriha bathing, all the while his strudel is hanging. However, instead of screaming like your typical female characters, she orders him to wash her back, and they take turns, which gets the two to begin to grow closer. She teases him for growing bigger in all the right places, and insists to let her clean his hood. Afterward, they head to bed, and to his surprise, she lies down next to him to get some sleep, and he warns her that it's not a good idea. However, she reminds him that they always slept together in her obai form, so he chooses to accept it. He reflects on how, despite having a girl sleeping next to him, it all feels normal as she has always been by his side. But when she starts cuddling him, Kazuya gets flustered and struggles to sleep. The next morning, Kiriha wakes Kazuya up for oversleeping. But in his sleep, he mutters how Kiriha is a Temu version of Rem, and it angers Kiriha that she steps on his family jewels. After waking up, Kazuya dashes off to school, hoping to make it before roll call, but he's already late. After class, the class rep, Chisato, scolds him harshly for being late, smacking him on his dumb head repeatedly. He mentally blames Kiriha, remembering how he looks over and sees his alarm clock destroyed. Kiriha, who clearly doesn't know how to work an alarm, smashed it because the ringing annoyed her. Then, she insisted on coming to school with him that morning, and fearing that she would treat him like a servant, he tricked her into turning back to an obai, locking her up, and leaving her back home while HR made a run for it. During lunch, his two goofy friends chat about a rumored ghost haunting the school. They describe what sounds exactly like the wig that attacked him the day before, making him realize he wasn't the only one who saw it. One of the guys dares Kazuya to test his courage by taking a girl to a dark hallway to create a romantic moment. But before they can joke any further, the school's strict discipline officer appears behind them and beats them up for discussing degenerate scenarios. She reminds them they should be working on their class reports instead of messing around. Kazuya suddenly remembers he hasn't started his report and begs to copy his friends. But before he can, Chisato grabs him by the collar and drags him off to the library, saying she'll personally supervise him until he finishes it. As he works on the assignment half-heartedly, Chisato reminisces about tutoring him when they were younger, since he always struggled academically. He thanks her for all the help in the past, and a little shyly, she asks if she can come over to his place again to help him study. Kazuya is about to agree, but then remembers Kiriha is home and quickly turns her down, making Chisato disappointed. After finishing his report, he gets up to return a book while Chisato heads to the exit, only to find the door won't open. In that moment, Kazuya sees an enraged Kiriha, and when Chisato goes to ask for his help to open the door, Kazuya is all beaten up. He simply brushes it off and tries to open the door, but fails to force it open, and they realize that they're stuck in there. He then tries to break the window, but fails after multiple attempts. Suddenly, Kiriha appears wearing a school uniform, and much to Kazuya's shock, she's not wearing any underwear. Embarrassed, he grabs her and pulls her to a corner to scold her for showing up uninvited. She responds by smacking him, and after calming down, Kiriha explains that since they're experiencing this kind of bizarre phenomenon, it means a spirit is involved. She tells him that there are two types of spirit-possessed objects like herself, which are born from treasured tools and develop full consciousness, and Amasogi, like the wig from before, which are quickly formed from unstable human emotions. Amasogi are immature and act on instinct, unlike the more composed object spirit. Then, Kiriha meets Chisato and quickly gets stopped by Kazuya for almost revealing her true nature. Then, following what they practiced, she introduces herself as Kazuya's cousin, who's there to check out the school. Kazuya adds that Kiriha loves ghost-related stuff and tells Chisato that she can help them. Then, after explaining to Chisato the situation, Kiriha pulls out a special pendant designed to detect Amasogi and explains that Amasogi is created by someone's wish. She adds that they need to find out what the wish is and who made the wish, but when they test it, the pendant reacts to all the books in the room, completely confusing them. Embarrassed, Kiriha assumes it must be a fake, so she decides to force the door open by using her spiral weave technique to drill it open. Instead of just opening the door, they suddenly find themselves in a different space and dimension, surrounded by endless books. Kiriha realizes that the entire study area has become the Amasogi itself. Books begin flying through the air and attacking them, but Kiriha creates a protective barrier just in time. Then, dozens of books gather into the shape of a huge creature, like a living book robot that begins to chase them. As they try to escape, individual books launch themselves at the group, but Kiriha notices something strange, and that only she is being targeted. The giant book creature catches up and attacks again. Kiriha dodges the attack, but one book nearly hits Chisato. Surprisingly, a second set of books blocks the attack and protects her. Kiriha quickly realizes that what this means is that Chisato is the source of the Amasogi. While still blocking attacks, she tells Kazuya to think about what Chisato said earlier. He's confused, wondering how that's relevant right now, but he goes along with it and starts recalling their conversation. Eventually, he remembers when Chisato asked to visit his home again and how he rejected her. Kiriha tells him that's exactly it, and that Chisato's desire was strong enough to manifest into an Amasogi. Kazuya turns to Chisato and invites her to come over to his place sometime. Phrasing it as a rizful, desire-filled question, she lights up with a smile and agrees. Instantly, the monster disappears, all the books collapse, the warped space crumbles, and they return safely to the regular library. Kazuya thanks Kiriha for the help and for making him understand Amasogi a lot more. Then, he turns to Chisato and expresses how he understands her feelings now. But instead of love, he tells her that she loves teaching people, which makes Chisato die inside. Unbeknownst to them, a mysterious woman named Kokayu watches everything from atop a pole before flying off into the distance. The next day, Chisato visits Kazuya's home as promised, where he finds Kazuya sleeping together with Kiriha, earning him a slap. Then, she apologizes to Kiriha for all the trouble, but Kiriha reassures her it wasn't her fault. She explains that behind the incident is something far more concerning, an invisible force called Malison, which is capable of distorting reality. Kiriha notes that the strange event in the library was caused by an unusually high concentration of Malison, and that it's extremely rare for so much to gather in one place, especially enough to create such a powerful Amasogi. Kiriha adds that it's the fault of the area's local god, Kukuri. Not long after, a mysterious Dami Mommy named Kokayu walks up to Kazuya's friend, Shiru, and asks if he's Kazuya. Shiru says no, so she turns to leave to find him. But the moment he gets a glimpse of her massive melons, Shiru decides to change his tune, not wanting to miss his shot. He blurts out that he's actually a friend of Kazuya's and can take her to him. A few years ago, Kazuya was in a coma after a serious accident, worried that his awakenings might make things worse. The local deity, Kukuri, chose to seal his overflowing spiritual energy, along with his memories, to stabilize him. However, because of it, Kukuri warned Kiriha that she would lose all her power and might revert to a normal Obai because Kazuya no longer remembered her. But she didn't mind. Back in the present, Kazuya gets greeted by his father in the morning, who tells Kazuya to come home early so they can eat dinner together. Then, when he arrives at school, he is greeted by Shiru's flying kick. When Kazuya demands an explanation, Shiru blames him for everything that happened the day before. Turns out, the day before, Shiru took Kokayu to a restaurant. Thinking he could riz her creamy melons, he did so by offering to pay for whatever she wanted. But he had no clue she was an unstoppable eating machine. She ordered the entire menu from the biggest steak to the kiddie's meal, devoured it all like prime Matt Stoney, and then ditched him dry, leaving Shiru with a mountain of debt. Shiru vents his anger, but Kazuya says he has no idea who Kokayu even is, which makes Shiru think he's lying. Meanwhile, Kokayu manages to locate Kazuya, as previously, when she returned to Kukuri's shrine empty-handed. She gets scolded for getting distracted by food. Kukuri tells her to go back to the school and bring Kazuya this time, but strictly without Kiriha by his side. Back at school, Kazuya is about to play arm wrestle with Shiru, when suddenly, everyone in class discovers that their lunches have been eaten. Chido suspects that it's another Amasogi, and in that moment, Kokayu appears in Kazuya's classroom out of nowhere. When Shiru sees her, he's still furious, and he demands she let him grab her soft jiggles as compensation or pay back the money she owes him. She calmly tells him to go ahead and squish, and as he charges at her, he gets whacked by Chisato's disciplinary weapon. Kokayu tells Kazuya to come with her, but Kiriha immediately materializes in her human form and shuts that down, saying there's no way she's letting him go anywhere. Kokayu claps back, saying no one asked for her opinion as a weak and useless washcloth, which instantly gets under Kiriha's skin. She's about to attack, but Kazuya holds her back. Instead of fighting outright, Kiriha challenges Kokayu to a one-armed wrestling match, and if Kiriha wins, she gets to come with Kazuya to the shrine, but if she loses, she has to stay behind. They head up to the rooftop, wearing tight gym clothes, where their battle begins. However, unlike a typical arm wrestling match, it turns into a one-armed martial arts fight. They clash skillfully, trading blow for blow, and in the heat of the match, Kiriha grabs Kokayu's thumb, slams her into the ground, and wins. Suddenly, a teacher pops up to scold them, but when the other students try to explain themselves, they're already gone. Meanwhile, Kazuya, Kiriha, and Chisato go to the shrine with Kokayu. They go with the expectation of meeting a majestic deity, but Kukuri greets them wearing a full-on costume and mask, shocking everyone with her appearance. When Kukuri notices Kiriha, she asks why she's there with them. And when Kiriha mentions that she defeated Kokayu in a one-armed wrestling contest, Kukuri knows exactly which battle it is. She states that she battled Kiriha a lot in one-armed wrestling, and that she wins more than Kiriha. But Kiriha disagrees, and believes that she won more, which starts an argument between them. Kiriha wastes no time and confronts Kukuri about the spiritual seal, which was supposed to last until Kazuya fully matured. Kukuri admits the seal isn't broken, just weakened, but the memories Kazuya lost are still locked away. Kiriha demands that she restore the seal and stabilize the growing Malison in the city, but Kukuri refuses. Instead, she calls on Kazuya to become a Malison cleaner, someone who purifies the spiritual disturbances plaguing the area. Kazuya is stunned, and Kiriha immediately protests against her cruel jokes, but Kukuri brushes her aside, explaining that Kazuya himself is the cause, as he's become a magnet for Malison where these strange events always happen around him, and thus, he must be the one to clean them up. As Kazuya stands there trembling in fear, Kiriha grabs him and tries to flee, but they're stopped by an invisible barrier. Kukuri calmly says no one's leaving until she gets an answer. Kiriha refuses again, and suddenly, Kokayu spreads her wings, grabs Chisato, and flies her out of harm's way. Kukuri dons a second Halloween mask and launches an attack using her powers as a water goddess. Kiriha reacts fast, forming a barrier with her sash to shield herself and Kazuya, but Kyukuri smashes through it with ease. Realizing escape is impossible, Kiriha scoops up Kazuya and attempts to fly off, only to crash into the barrier again. Suspicious, Kiriha questions Kyukuri's strange behavior regarding why the seal has weakened and why she won't remove her mask. She charges forward and attacks with her sledgehammer weave, aiming for the mask, but Kyukuri blocks it with a powerful water wall and counters, sending Kiriha crashing to the ground. Kyukuri admits Kiriha had the right idea to target the mask, which is indeed tied to her current powers. As Kiriha struggles to her feet, Kyukuri begins chanting an incantation. Once the spell is complete, she summons the water impact, a powerful force of water from the sky, and unleashes it upon them, determined to force her will on them both. Kiriha quickly shields both herself and even Kyukuri is caught off guard by the strength of the technique, but using that much power and energy takes a toll on Kiriha, and she shrinks down in size, looking like a drained midget. Kyukuri mocks her persistence, warning that she shouldn't try to keep fighting if she can't even handle a second water impact, but Kiriha refuses to back down, not wanting to give up Kazuya and for him to become a Malison cleaner for Kyukuri. Kyukuri launches another water impact, while Kiriha tries to shield them again with her wall weave, but this time her strength isn't enough. She starts losing consciousness, and the barrier cracks, letting the rushing water slam through. Suddenly, Kazuya wakes up in a strange, unknown place, and there, a bizarre, grinning woman stands before him. She laughs at him for losing the battle against Kyukuri, calling him an idiot for even challenging her. Confused and irritated by her words, he tries to go back to his world, but she blocks him and asks for a favor. To his surprise, she asks him to save Kiriha, which confuses him, as he's a weak, useless bum, and has never been able to protect himself, let alone someone else. He asks her how he's supposed to pull that off, and she tells him to stop being a burden and grow stronger. Strong enough to protect Kiriha, instead of always needing protection from her. It still doesn't make a lot of sense to him, but she goes on to say he can save them right now as long as he defends against Kyukuri's special attack and uses a special technique that requires Kiriha's true name. He's confused again, not knowing what Kiriha's real name is, but the woman insists he already does, and encourages him to remember the name of the one who's most loyal to him. Next thing he knows, he's back in the water, with Kiriha kissing him as she tries to revive him. They break the surface, gasping for air to face Kyukuri, and Kiriha is ready to keep fighting her, but Kazuya stops her. He tells her to return to her Obai form since she no longer has the strength to continue. She refuses at first, but as her master, Kazuya, orders her to turn back into an Obai by mentioning her real name, Ayasakura. The command stuns Kyukuri, and in her Obai form, she starts smacking Kazuya for using her real name, as now, Kazuya has to use Kiriha as his weapon and face Kyukuri. Immediately, Kyukuri attacks again, and though Kazuya creates a shield, it's too weak, and he gets hit. Kiriha scolds him for his weak attempt, forcing Kazuya to lock in, and on Kyukuri's next attack, he manages to create a perfect shield, earning Kiriha's praise. Seeing that, Kukri prepares her full force and summons a monstrous water serpent, and Kazuya freezes, unsure of what to do. But then he remembers the advice that the woman had told him, exactly how to counter this. He quickly activates Shield Weave, and Kukri scoffs, thinking he's just repeating a failed strategy. She commands the serpent to strike, but Kazuya counters with Watershed, splitting the attack in two. Then he launches himself into the air and uses special Spiral Weave, spinning toward Kukri like a human drill. Kukri throws up an ice barrier, but it shatters as his attack pierces through. However, when the dust settles, Kukri manages to grab hold of Kiriha, threatening to finish her off. Desperate to save her, Kazuya agrees that he'll become a Malison cleanser. Kukri lets go of Kiriha, and just like that, the storm clouds fade and the sky clears. Kukri expresses her excitement for Kazuya as their new Malison cleaner, but suddenly, the mask covering Kukuri's face cracks and falls away, revealing that she isn't some majestic goddess, but just a normal girl, leaving Kazuya and Kiriha completely stunned. Kukuri, now blushing in embarrassment, fumbles to explain herself. Kiriha, realizing this was what Kukuri had been hiding all along, starts laughing at her midget-looking form. To have her revenge, Kiriha mocks and does things to Kukuri that we can't fully show on screen. Afterwards, they all sit down and talk, and Kukuri reveals that the real reason why she wanted Kazuya to become the Malison cleaner is so he can fully become Kiriha's master, instead of her servant. When Kiriha figures out that Kukuri had manipulated them the entire time, she's furious and ragdolls her around out of frustration. Then, they go home, and after splitting up with Chisato, Kazuya carries Kiriha on her back, and promises that, with her help, he will do his best as the Malison cleaner. Later that evening, Kazuya is still reeling from the day's events, and from Kiriha's current smaller appearance. She's now shorter, which is a side effect of draining her power. Kazuya makes a joke about it, and Kiriha snaps back that she won't stay this way forever, but it might take some time for her to fully recover. Then, they shower together like before for some happy shower fun time. and Kiriha reflects on the technique Kazuya used earlier. It dawns on her that it's the exact same move his mother, Kanaka, once used. A memory comes to her of the time she was licking a lollipop, sitting beside Kanaka, who gently told her that if anything ever happened to her, she needed to protect Kazuya no matter what, and Kiriha promised that she would. Remembering that promise, Kiriha collapses, forcing Kazuya to take care of her. Then, to handle Kiriha's new body, he goes to ask his sister for her old clothes. But instead of reacting normally, she gets frightened, thinking about how Kazuya will get freaky and cover her clothes with his brotherly jizz of love. He quickly walks away and asks Chisato for the same thing, and she agrees to lend hers. However, Kazuya realizes that he needs something for Kiriha to wear that night. So he calls upon his shady buddy, Osamu, who hands him secret girls' clothes for him to goon to. But Kazuya assures him that is not the case. He then goes home with some puddings for Kiriha and shows her the clothes he got from Osamu. But when she opens them, she questions why all of them are both gooning material and on the FBI hit list. FBI, open up! After getting punched, he explains that he got them from his friend, and while Kiriha deems them weird, she suggests that she wear the ones Kazuya likes the most, but he quickly brushes her off. The next day, just as Kazuya sits on his school desk, Osamu cryptically smiles at him, knowing he had a good creamy time with those clothes. A few days later, Kiriha tells Kazuya that it's time to start training so he can prepare for his new role as a Malison cleanser. But Kazuya, being a lazy bum as always, tells her he's not interested, which instantly irritates her. She goes to smack him with her sash, only to realize that she can't even defend herself anymore, as ever since the battle with Kyukuri, her strength has plummeted. Now she's not just unable to protect herself, but she can't protect Kazuya either if another Amasogi event shows up. So she explains that she has to train him seriously so he can eventually handle threats on his own. Training begins, and Kazuya is already wheezing and wiped out from just running a short distance. Kiriha watches in disbelief, wondering if this guy really has what it takes. She transforms into her Obai form and tells him to try using the same move he pulled off during the fight with Kyukuri. But Kazuya has no idea how he did it, which frustrates her even more, questioning how he even managed to do it in the first place. Kazuya shrugs, saying that he's just as clueless as she is. With no other choice, Kiriha calls it a day and says they'll head back home, realizing that Kazuya's more hopeless than she thought. Back at home, they take another bath together. While in there, Kiriha teaches him more about herself as an object spirit. She explains that she can turn into both an Obai and a human form, and asks him why. When he gets it wrong, she gives his jewels a smack, and explains that since object spirit are tools, they can't exist without a human to connect with, as their power is tied to the bond they share with their master. She admits she hadn't fully accepted Kazuya until their fight at the shrine. Now, having burned through all her stored energy, she has to rely solely on the link keeping her alive, which also explains why Kyukuri suddenly turned into a midget. Meanwhile, over at the shrine, Kyukuri and Kokayu meet with some carpenters to repair the damage from the recent battle. But as soon as the workers find out the shrine is broke and can't pay for their work, they effed off. That night, heavy rain falls, and the shrine starts to fall apart. Far away, Kiriha smiles wide, knowing that Kyukuri got screwed over by the rain, and that the once mighty goddess now finds herself homeless. But Kokayu says she already has another place in mind for them to stay in. The next day, they run into Kiriha and Kazuya during their training session, where Kiriha is beating up Kazuya into shape while venting out her frustration. Kyukuri asks what's going on, and Kiriha says she's helping him practice his range control, which leaves Kyukuri confused, wondering why the same guy who defeated her is being taught the basics. Kiriha explains that the whole battle was just a fluke and that Kazuya is actually super weak, which shocks Kyukuri. She begins to suspect she might have made a terrible mistake making him a Malison cleanser. As she turns to leave, Kiriha notices she's walking in the direction of their new home, not the shrine, and asks her where she's going. Kyukuri's embarrassed, and Kiriha follows her out of curiosity and cracks up when she sees their new place, a tiny, bum-looking house that the almighty goddess now has to live in. The following day, Kazuya gets called by the student council president, and when he goes to his office, the president, Tadadaka, expresses how happy he is to see Kazuya again. When Kazuya doesn't recognize him, Tadadaka changes his hair, revealing himself as the girl he saved from the wig Amasogi, which shocks Kazuya. Then, he explains something called tabletop RPGs, a role-playing game played with pen and paper instead of a computer. Kazuya is confused, so Tadadaka gets to the point that a club calling itself the Tabletop RPG Association has taken over the Social Studies Research Club's room. And that's a problem. Tadadaka sent someone to deal with it, but the guy came back saying he saw a monster. As they walk down the hall to investigate, they run into Osamu, and suddenly, Tadadaka realizes the entire club room has disappeared. Kiriha checks for Amasogi with her pendant, and it reacts instantly, confirming something's wrong. She urges them to leave since they're not ready to deal with this kind of danger yet. But it's too late, as the hallway has already been blocked off. Then, a guy with a massive forehead, Nakajima, appears and demands that Tadedeka officially recognize their club and give them a room. He hands over a form, but Tadedeka refuses to even consider it. Kazuya suggests he pretend to agree just to stop the Amasogi's effect, but Tadedeka stands firm, refusing to budge. So Nakajima pulls out a sketchbook, draws a minotaur, and suddenly the monster appears and begins chasing them. As they try to escape, their path is blocked, and they rush into a science lab, only to realize they've walked right into a trap. Kiriha tells Kazuya they'll need to use their heads to get out of this one. Kazuya starts thinking, using all of his brain cells for once, and figures out that the sketchbook itself is the Amasogi, where anything drawn in it becomes real. They realize that if they can find a way to erase the drawings, they might win. Tadedeka and Osamu try throwing water at the Minotaur, but it doesn't work. But then, Kazuya grabs a fire extinguisher and sprays it on the Minotaur's drawing, erasing its arm, which causes the creature to lose its arm in real life. It gives them enough time to run, but another wall blocks their path. Kazuya gets ready to use the extinguisher again and manages to delete one wall, but it runs empty quickly. Nakajima reappears with his Minotaur and its flimsy new arm, and he tells them it's over. But Kazuya notices another extinguisher nearby, and he's got to find a way to get to it. In that moment, Tadedeka considers giving up, blaming himself for everything. But Kazuya stops him and takes the blame, reminding him that the Malison was drawn to him, not Tadedeka. He signals Kiriha, and she turns into an obai. With her support, Kazuya rushes forward, using the techniques he learned during his range training. He snatches the fire extinguisher using his sash and smashes the Minotaur with it, finally defeating it. Nakajima returns to normal and is confused about what just happened. Kiriha tells him that if he wants to avoid the punishment that comes from Malison atonement, he has to destroy the Amasogi himself. So, Nakajima tears the sketchbook apart, looking like he regrets his actions. But suddenly, he pulls out a single page he had saved and summons another Minotaur. Just as everyone starts panicking, Osamu steps in like a Chad. He says not to worry, explaining that he swapped Nakajima's sketchbook with a fake earlier, suspecting something like this might happen. He opens the real one and draws a powerful fire dragoon that blasts Nakajima's Minotaur out of existence in one shot. Afterward, they gather, and Osamu expresses how disappointed he is with how Nakajima used his textbook. Instead, he shows how real men use the and draws Kiriha in her full plotful potential. Kiriha gets angry at it, and Kazuya tries to defend it, but ends up getting his family jewel ruined by the other Kiriha, which shows that her sadistic prowess is also at its full potential. A few days later, a simp named Hiroshi works up the nerve to confess his feelings to Chisato on the rooftop. While Kazuya and Kiriha watch, Chisato gently turns him down, and Hiroshi demands an explanation, questioning whether he's too ugly for love. But Chisato explains that she already likes someone else. Later, at Kazuya's place, he asks Chisato about the guy she likes, asking her who it is, but she refuses to tell him and calls him rude. Just then, while looking for puddings, Kiriha pulls out a doll from Chisato's bag, and when they ask her what it is, she gets flustered and refuses to talk about it. Meanwhile, feeling embarrassed and frustrated, Hiroshi later vents his feelings while playing a dating sim game on his computer. Suddenly, a strange glitch appears, asking him to make a wish. The next day, Kazuya arrives at school and immediately notices something weird. Everyone is paired up and talking like they're in some kind of dating game, discussing romantic routes and plot developments, while Kazuya is still trying to figure out what's going on. He bumps into a girl in the hallway, causing her to fall. She gets flustered and quickly asks if he saw anything. Right then, a dating sim panel appears in front of Kazuya with multiple choice options, asking him to pick one. He panics, picks the one involving baby oil, and gets slapped by her. When he finally makes it to class, he sees the same choice screens popping up in front of all his classmates. His buddy, Shiru, is in the middle of rizzing up a girl and informs him that after school, there will be a special game event to confess to the girl he loves under the cherry tree. While Kazuya is confused, Kiriha explains that it's the work of a gal game Amasogi, a spirit born from the emotions surrounding dating sim games. Kazuya is stunned to hear that such a thing exists, and even more surprised that Kiriha knows what it is. She says the Amasogi is likely somewhere in the school, so Kazuya starts investigating. Eventually, he spots Hiroshi with Chisato, and they're acting like a romantic couple. Kazuya calls out to her, but she tells him not to call her name so casually. Shocked, Kazuya accuses Hiroshi of doing something strange, pointing out that Chisato just rejected him the day before. Hiroshi pretends to be clueless, and before Kazuya can press further, Chisato slaps him and leaves with Hiroshi. As they walk away, Hiroshi gets arrogant at Kazuya, mocking him for failing to rizz up Chisato as her childhood friend, and says that no one can beat him in a game called Pure Heart. That's when Kiriha realizes Hiroshi must be the host of the Amasogi, since he knows the game's name, which is something Kazuya hadn't figured out yet. He tries to stop Hiroshi head-on, but the simp summons his ugly roster, and they beat up Kazuya. With him defeated, Kiriha orders him to win over Chisato, while she will try and turn off the game to defeat the Amasogi. To learn more, Kazuya turns to Osamu, who explains that to win the game, he has to win someone over and choose responses that increase their affection. Inspired, Kazuya sets out to talk to Chisato, and with Osamu's guidance, he manages to ask her to teach him math as usual. However, when he tries to rizz her up, and gets the Ike, and Osamu tells him to read the room. Then, all three of them have lunch together, and like an expert in Rizology, Kazuya manages to get 3 correct responses in a row, closing in to completely swoon Chisato off her sweet cheeks. Unfortunately, when she brings up the topic of Kiriha, Kazuya picks up all the wrong options, making it seem like he's bumping bellies with Kiriha every night, and it causes Chisato to explode on him. Later, they regroup with Kiriha, who informs them that she hasn't found the game yet. However, to turn the tide in their favor, Osamu introduces to Kazuya the NTR combo, which is doing or saying something extremely meaningful that can instantly max out her affection. He tells Kazuya to dig into their past, since they were childhood friends. Later, under the cherry tree, while Hiroshi is trying to win Chisato over for good in the final stage of the game, Kazuya interrupts. He pulls out 2 small dolls they used to play with as kids and asks her to play with him again. In that moment, the memories come rushing back to Chisato of when she played mommy and daddy with Kazuya. But back then, after getting mocked by other boys, Kazuya refused to play anymore. At that moment, Chisato handed Kazuya the father doll while she kept the mother doll, and told Kazuya that they would play again one day. It breaks the Amasogi's influence, and she runs to hug Kazuya, leaving Hiroshi stunned and speechless. Embarrassed and defeated, Hiroshi runs off, and the group go to the infirmary, leaving Kazuya and Chisato to rest, while Kiriha and Osamu find the Amasogi. Later, when Kazuya wakes up, he finds Chisato kissing him while he's tied up in bed. He sees her without her plot armor and realizes that she's still under the Amasogi's influence and behaving as if they're in the final romantic scene of the game. Kazuya tries to reason with her and help her snap out of it. At the same time, Kiriha and Osamu confront Hiroshi, who reveals that the source of the Amasogi is a PC running the dating sim in the school computer lab. Osamu immediately realizes it's the X-rated Johnny Sins version of the game and warns that Kazuya might be in danger. They rush to shut it down, and just in time, they power off the system and rush back to the infirmary, where Chisato returns to her normal self, leaving them both blushing and completely flustered when Kiriha finds them. However, because of their plot development, they become closer, just like their old days playing dolls as husband and wife. After that, Kiriha and Kazuya head over to Kukuri's new place, and Kiriha wastes no time to bully Kukuri and accuses Kukuri of not giving an honest report about the Malison levels after the attack at school. Just then, Kokayu pops up in uniform, and when Kazuya asks her where she's going, Kokayu informs them that she will be taking part-time jobs to cover expenses, leaving Kukuri under Kiriha's bullying. Kukuri tries fighting back, but is too weak to do anything, and gets bullied even more. Kazuya then asks Kiriha to knock it off, and promises to buy her puddings, which Kiriha agrees to. When Kazuya leaves, Kiriha takes the chance to talk to Kurihi personally. She asks the reason why she became extremely weak, and whether her weakness has anything to do with why she chose Kazuya to become a Malison cleanser. Kukuri stays quiet, refusing to answer, even when Kiriha threatens to force it out of her, but they end up making sand castles instead. Suddenly, a ball is yeeted at the castle, making them dirty, and Kiriha chases after the stupid kids who did it to them. Later, Kukuri joins them back home, and they all end up sharing a casual bath. During it, Kukuri is forced to wash Kiriha after she refused to let Kazuya bathe with them. Kiriha asks her again the reason she became weak, but when Kukuri refuses to say anything, they start insulting each other's ashboards, which ends with them both overheating from the bath. After seeing Kukuri off, Kazuya joins his family for dinner and sneaks away to prepare a plate of food for Kiriha, which is something he usually does secretly. But to his shock, Kiriha is already at the dinner table, eating with his family. He's stunned to learn that his family has known about Kiriha all along, even though he thought she was his little secret. Kazuya asks his father if he knows about Kiriha, and the poor old man tells his son that during the days he was trying to rizz his mother, Kiriha was always there as her guardian and stopped all of his attempts to clap some cheeks. When Kiriha casually asks for pudding, the father quickly gets it for her like a good maid, but Kazuya suddenly remembers he didn't give Kukuri any before she left. so he rushes out with Kiriha to deliver it. To their surprise, they find Kyukuri's temporary shelter at the playground destroyed. Kokayu explains that the city took it down, labeling it dangerous after a kid got hurt on the slide. Kyukuri is crushed, wondering where she's going to sleep now. Feeling bad, Kazuya offers her and Kokayu a place to stay at his home. The next morning, Kazuya wakes up and walks into the bathroom half asleep, only to accidentally grab Kokayu's milky melons. She flirts with him playfully, but Kazuya, ever the shy guy, is way too flustered to respond while seeing the plot in front of him. It reminds Kazuya of how the night before, the family held a meeting. Kazuya's sister and father are against Kokayu staying with them because of her overwhelmingly goon-worthy presence, worried she might corrupt Kazuya. When the father doubles down in not allowing them to stay, Kiriha settles the argument by threatening to recite an embarrassing poem Kazuya's dad once wrote, forcing him to agree. Soon after moving in, Kyukuri turns the small section of the house given to her into a mini shrine. Kiriha then tells her that they need to go out later to handle something important. But when Kyukuri finds out they're visiting Tagiri to ask for a loan to rebuild the shrine, she tries to back out. Kiriha pushes her to come along anyway, and they arrive at Tagari's shrine. Kukri calls on Tagiri, and they get sucked inside the building. Tagari, a fellow local goddess, agrees to lend them money, but only if they play her in a special card game. The game seems normal at first, where they flip over cards, and whatever amount they find written on the cards becomes the loan they'll receive. But to their surprise, they manage to find freaky cards, where armpits get sniffed, and Tagari gets to do what's written on it to them to fulfill her freaky kink of girls with washboard melons. When Kiriha finds out, she's furious with Kyukuri for not warning her, especially since she's played this exact game with Tagari before. Kyukuri says she wasn't allowed to reveal the details as part of the deal. Kiriha tries to walk away, but Kyukuri begs her to stay, as they only need a few cards to reach their lone goal. As the game goes on, Tagari keeps drawing cards that let her mess with the two girls, starting from giving them a Frenchie, to neck licking, all the way to forcing them to wear costumes. Frustrated, Kiriha has a plan and pretends to need the bathroom, and asks Tagiri to show her the way. Once Tagiri is gone, Kyukuri quickly rearranges the cards in hopes of gaining an advantage. When Tagari returns, she notices something's off. Suspicious, she checks the cards but finds them unchanged, and Kyukuri assures her that she didn't do anything. So Tagiri plays her turn and doesn't get the card she wants, which is a win for the gang. Tagiri realizes that the girls cheated by taking away the fingerprints on the card for their advantage. But just when Kiriha and Kyukuri think they've outwitted her, Tagari grins and points at a rule posted on the wall, stating that if a player touches the cards outside their turn, the opponent gets all the remaining cards. Instantly, Kyukuri and Kiriha realize they're screwed, and they are forced to stay the night, which ends with them getting the full Diddy treatment. Back home, Kiriha is leisurely watching her favorite TV show when Kazuya's father pops up, humbly asking her to let him watch baseball. But she refuses, which ends with the poor old man having to listen to the game on his radio. In the middle of watching, Kazuya's sister, Kasumi, pops up, turns off the TV, and drags Kiriha to the kitchen to see that. Unlike her, Kyukuri helps around the house. When Kiriha refuses to do the same, Kasumi threatens never to buy pudding anymore, and Kiriha begs for her mercy and agrees to help out. She's tasked to peel potatoes while Kyukuri cuts the cabbage. Kasumi notices that they're out of groceries, so she sends off Kazuya and the girls on an errand to buy groceries. Once there, the girls drool when looking at all the snacks there, but Kazuya stops them and reminds them to follow the shopping list. While Kyukuri follows his orders, buying only things from the shopping list, she imagines herself as his housewife. Meanwhile, Kiriha puts tons of puddings into the trolley, but Kazuya puts them all back, refusing to give up. She starts singing and begging for puddings, which causes people to look at her out of pity, and forcing Kazuya to get her one pudding, which she's happy about. Meanwhile, Kyukuri also wants her own dessert food later, and she imagines herself doing the same thing Kiriha did to get it. But before she does anything, the others call out for her to check out. At the cashier, people line up to get served by the busty mommy, Kokayu. When it's Kazuya's turn, she serves him, and they go home together for dinner back at Kazuya's place, where they feast on Kasumi's homemade food. After they finish, Kiriha digs in her pudding, while Kyukuri can only watch. But to her surprise, Kazuya hands her the red bean pudding she wants, and eats it with full of joy. A few days later, Kazuya heads to school and is shocked to see a bunch of girls gathered around Shiru, giggling and fawning over him. Kazuya can't believe what he's seeing, as he's always known Shiru to be awkward and unlucky with girls. Even Osamu looks confused, starting to suspect that something strange is going on. Just then, Kiriha pops out of Kazuya's bag, confidently declaring that this must be another Amasogi incident. Kazuya panics and tells her not to pop out in public, as someone might see her. Kiriha, however, grabs his jewels and scolds him for being overly cautious and reminds him that the weather forecast predicted high malison levels this week, so something weird is bound to happen. She adds that this is why they need someone like him, a malison cleanser, to deal with it. Kazuya, still a bit unsure of what to do, steps forward and accuses Shiru of using some kind of item to make himself more attractive. The other guys, all clearly jealous, gasp at his statement. Shiru denies it, but accidentally slips up and mentions he used some kind of cologne. As soon as he says that, all the boys start chasing him like they've just heard about a miracle cure, hoping to get their hands on the same cologne. They follow him like a stampede. Shiru tries to run, and Kiriha returns to her obai form to knock a few of them back with her sash. Kazuya watches the chaos and asks if the boys are being affected by the Amasogi too. Kiriha explains that whatever created this Amasogi must be resonating strongly with their own desires, which is why the effect spread so fast. The mob nearly catches Shiru, but Kiriha grabs him, and they all escape down the hall, locking themselves in an empty classroom. But the mob starts climbing through the windows, determined to get in. With no other option, Kazuya follows Kiriha's instructions and activates the sledgehammer weave, clearing the malison cloud that's been hanging over the school and calming everything down. After things settle, Shiru is tied up and questioned about what happened. He explains that he used the cologne after getting rejected by a girl, thinking it would make him more appealing. He was about to throw it away when he heard a strange voice telling him to try it again. And after that, everything changed. Kazuya tells him that, like all Amasogi, it has to be destroyed by the one who created it. Shiru agrees and tries to smash the bottle, but it bounces and accidentally sprays on Kazuya instead. Suddenly, all the girls start chasing Kazuya around. He somehow escapes and makes it home, heading straight to the bathroom to clean himself off. But he doesn't realize the cologne's effects are still in play. While he's in the bath, strange things begin happening. His sister, Kasumi, enters the room for some Alabama loving, followed by others who have also been affected. Kazuya tries to keep calm, but the situation quickly becomes overwhelmingly creamy for him, and they all push him to his limit. Suddenly, they declare that they will all run a train on him, and he realizes that he doesn't have enough juice for all of them. Realizing he has no choice, Kazuya grabs the cologne and smashes it to stop everything from getting out of control. This ends the Amasogus influence, but as a side effect of malison atonement, Shiru ends up releasing a terrible odor that smells like a dead rat for a full week, and his classmates keep their distance from him the whole time. A few days later, Kazuya continues training by sparring Kyukuri, and he loses horribly, which earns him a punishment from Kiriha. Then, at school, the student council president calls Kazuya, Chisato, and Osamu into his office. But when they step inside, they are greeted by his bald head, which he quickly covers with a wig. Kazuya demands an explanation for his hair loss, and Kiriha pops up to inform him that, because of the malison atonement, Tadatoka lost all his hair after Kazuya defeated his Amasogi. Hearing that, Chisato is scared of the prospect of going bald if Kazuya had defeated her Amasogi. But Kiriha assures her that Amasogi has different natures. Tadatoka then explains that something strange has been happening at school lately, where a mysterious girl keeps appearing to students and asking them for something. Kazuya and Kiriha are a little annoyed they were called in for what sounds like a basic ghost story, but then Tadatoka reveals the real twist that the girl, named Nego, died 2 years ago. Kiriha immediately figures it's the work of an Amasogi. Osamu suggests they start gathering clues by asking students around the school. They split up and began talking to people about the dead girl, Nego. After some interviews, they learn that Nego ended her life by jumping off a building. But before she did that, she had joined a fan club for a popular boy named Yuyuichi. They also hear about a student named Nanako from the newspaper club, who's been doing her own research on the incident. Later, the group meets to compare notes. While they're talking, they spot Nanako trying to interview a student nearby. They meet up with Nanako, who is excited to know that other people are also interested in Nego's story. Suddenly, the girl she was speaking with collapses in fear, and when they rush over, they see Nego's ghost, who is demanding a letter. Kazuya tries to attack with his obai, but Nego blocks it and disappears, leaving them confused about what the letter means. In the infirmary, Kiriha explains that this isn't just any Amasogi, but it's a kamiani, a particularly dangerous one created from lingering regrets attached to a person's hair after death. Chisato adds that it must be connected to a living host whose emotions align with the ghosts. They call in Kasakabe, the frightened girl from earlier, and ask her to explain everything she knows. She tells them that after they all got enrolled in the school, a lot of girls started liking Yuyuichi. She and her friends agreed to share him in Yuichi's fan club, but he ended up falling for Nego. The rest got jealous and began bullying her, which eventually led to her death. While discussing how to continue their investigation, another student enters with a report that Nego had a younger sister enrolled in the school, something Tadatoka didn't know. It turns out the sister had been using a different surname due to their parents' divorce. but when they check who it is, they're stunned to realize it's Nanako from the newspaper club. They rush to the site where the Amasogi is harassing another student, demanding the letter again. When they arrive, Kazuya stops Nego and confronts Nanako, asking her why she's doing all of this. Nanako replies that she only wanted to find out why her sister took her own life, and her lingering feelings connected with Nego's hair, causing the Amasogi to take on Nego's form. Kiriha doesn't buy the story and says Nanako has a different reason for this mess. When Kazuya asks again about the letter, Nanako points to the terrified girl on the ground, Miratsuki, saying she should know more. Miratsuki admits she and her friends bullied Nego out of jealousy, but on the day Nego died, she confronted her bullies and told them that she said she was going to confess to Yuichi. Then, Miratsuki saw her head to the rooftop and wanted to apologize, but all she found was her shoes, her letter, and her body on the first floor. Believing the letter would reveal Nego's true feelings, Miratsuki kept it but never opened it. Miratsuki fetches the letter, and Nanako reads it. In it, Nego talks about a dark lump growing in her chest, a symbol of her pain. The dark lump told her that it could help fulfill her final wish and then disappear. Nego believed that her wish was to confess her love to Yuichi, but to her shock, she soon realized the Amasogi wanted her to harm her sister, Nanako, who was considered better than her in everything. Wanting to protect her own sister, Nego chose to end her own life instead. Reading this, Nanako breaks down, blaming herself and saying she wishes it had been she who died instead. Kiriha realizes that this is exactly what the Amasogi was after, and it needed Nanako to wish for her own death to grow stronger. The Amasogi reappears, now larger and more twisted, with the same dark mass on its chest. It lashes out at Nanako, but Kazuya shields her just in time. More attacks follow, and Kazuya blocks some but gets knocked back hard. The creature swells in size, becoming even more terrifying. Kazuya launches a sledgehammer weave attack, but it bounces off, and Kiriha tells him he's too slow when switching between techniques. He focuses and starts delivering rapid strikes. Eventually, he finds an opening, activates Spiral Weave, and drives it straight through the Amasogi, destroying it. Even though the battle is over, Nanako is still overwhelmed with guilt. Kiriha walks up to her and calmly explains that Nego didn't write the letter to make her feel bad, but instead, it proves that she loved her little sister deeply. Kiriha encourages her to stop wishing for her own death and to honor Nego's sacrifice by living on. In another town, a girl named Sunao and her spirit partner meet with their local god to request permission to head to Kamioka, the neighboring area, to deal with some rising Malison activity. The god agrees to let them go after confirming that they're strong enough to take on the job, and elects Sunao as a Malison cleaner. The god asks her if she's sure that she wants to go to Kamioka, knowing how dangerous it is, and Sunao expresses how sure she is to go there. Meanwhile, Kazuya and the others report back to Tadadaka about Nanako's incident, and they are glad that it ended in a good way. Just then, Nanako pops in, and to everyone's surprise, she writes on a whiteboard, telling them that she can't talk anymore. Kazuya realizes that it's an Amasogi atonement, but Nanako assures him that it's all her responsibility to face. Coldly, Kiriha agrees with her statement and walks away, leaving Nanako unable to speak. Later, while Kazuya is minding his own goon-loving business, he suddenly gets punched in the face and drops to the floor. Confused and wondering who he upset this time, Sunao stands in front of him, still swinging, and Kiriha jumps out of Kazuya's bag to stop her, blocking a kick that was about to land. Kiriha demands to know what Sunao's problem is, but Sunao turns her attacks toward Kiriha instead. The two go at it, trading blows after blows in an intense back and forth. Sunao manages to catch Kiriha's kick and slams her to the ground, leaving her defeated. Out of her willpower to protect Kazuya, Kiriha's sash lashes out at Sunao in defense, but it gets sliced through mid-air by Kotsu, Sunao's spirit. This annoys Sunao, who had told Kotsu to stay out of it. Still, she orders Kotsu to shift into her true form, shocking Kazuya and Kiriha when they realize Kotsu is actually a sword-type object spirit. Kiriha questions why Sunao would attack someone who's supposed to be on her side, and Sunao explains that she herself is a Malison cleanser, and came specifically to evaluate Kazuya's strength. She says it's absurd that someone as weak as Kazuya is trying to take over Kanaka's role, not knowing that Kazuya doesn't even remember that Kanaka was his own mother. Kiriha is stunned that Sunao even knows who Kanaka is, and Sunao declares that she'll be taking this matter to the local god. They head to Kukuri's shrine, which is in Kazuya's place, and when Kukuri presents herself gloriously, Kiriha bullies her to humble her, shocking Sunao to see the local god is getting bullied. She remembers how, in disbelief, she saw Kanaka's obai in the hands of a weak loser like Kazuya. Then, when she asked Kukuri, she told Sanao how Kanaka is dead and that her pathetic, useless son is taking over, which angers Sanao. Then, Sanao explains that she doesn't think Kazuya and Kiriha are fit to succeed Kanaka as Malison cleansers. Then, Sanao tells Kukuri she wants to take over the position instead. She argues that only the strongest should be allowed to serve as a region's Malison cleanser, and suggests they settle things with a duel, and the winner gets the title. Kazuya and Kiriha are stunned by the idea. She brings up her own past, where years ago, her older brother was killed by an Amasogi. That loss devastated her and drove her to vow revenge. Even though she was still young, she went to her region's god and asked for a spirit partner to fight the creature responsible. The god refused, telling her to go play like other kids her age, and reminding her how her brother wanted her to grow like a normal happy girl. But Sanao ignored her, took her brother's former object spirit, and went after the Amasogi who took her brother's life herself. However, by the time she got there, Kanaka had already defeated the creature. Sanao, full of frustration, redirected her anger at Kanaka, and declared that she would beat her one day. She kept challenging Kanaka and lost every time, which only fueled her desire to get stronger even more. But when she finally returned, ready for another duel, she found out that Kanaka had passed away and had been replaced by someone she saw as a pathetic bum. At home, Kazuya coops up in his room with a heavy heart. He knows he hasn't lived up to his responsibilities, and it eats away at him that innocent people like Nanako and Tadatoka are suffering because of his weakness. He now believes that everything would be better without him existing. But Kiriha refuses to be a servant to such a weakling, and jumps into the futon before removing his clothes. Now, without any plot armor, Kiriha gives him a much-needed intimate hug. He asks her why she's hugging him, and tells him that it's to comfort him. She reminds him that running away will only make things worse, and when he disagrees, she squeezes his baby jewels. She tells him that she has never thought of him as a burden, and reminds him that whatever happens in the future, she will always stand by his side. She encourages him to keep moving forward and make as many mistakes as he can, promising that she will be there to clean them with him and be the shoulder he can cry on. While blushing, she adds that she'd be lonely without him, and that comfort renews his resolve. Just then, Kiriha manages to return to her full plotful size form, and she wastes no time trying to get his golden pickle also in his full size. Then, they start coming up with a plan to win the duel against Sanao. Remembering how Sanao showed them all her battle techniques to make their battle more even, Kiriha tells him that they're at a disadvantage. But Kazuya is not willing to lose, and hearing that, Kiriha promises to grant him any wish if he wins. Suddenly, Kazuya's sister and Kukuri open the door and walk in, only to find Kiriha on top of Kazuya in a suspicious pose. They quickly drag her away, stopping the creation of Kazuya Jr. After that, Kazuya and Kiriha begin training hard to get ready for their upcoming duel, and they make preparations against Sanao's close range with her sword. But knowing she has techniques for far range as well, they brainstorm to work around it. Kiriha then adds that since she's an obai, going against Kotsu, who's a sword, will be extremely dangerous for her. But Kiriha has a plan. Meanwhile, in her region, Sanao spars with Hinoka, the local god, to sharpen her own skills, and manages to impress her. Sanao seems pretty confident that beating Kazuya will be a breeze after knowing all his mother's techniques. But as she boasts about it, Kotsu, her object spirit, warns her not to be so arrogant. Kotsu points out that Kazuya had to pass a test to become a Malison cleanser, so he suggests that she shouldn't assume he's weak just because he doesn't look strong. But Sanao brushes her off, telling her not to act smart and just stay in her lane as a tool. She makes it clear that, unlike her, Kazuya went through his test against Kiruri, a water goddess, which is easy to defend with his wall weave, but with her sword, it will be easy for Sanao to penetrate him. So she believes that it will be extremely easy to win. Later that day, while Kazuya and Kiriha are bathing together, she gets close and personal and explains how the duel will work. She informs him that, after Kukuri agreed to mediate their duel, both fighters will be protected by water barriers, which are linked to 2 water dolls, and any damage taken during the battle is transferred to the dolls instead of hurting the fighters themselves. She adds that the fight continues until one of the dolls breaks, but there's a catch that the barriers only protect the humans, not their object spirit, which means that both Kiriha and Kotsu can still be injured. Kiriha also tells Kazuya he'll be able to use 2 different projections of her as a decoy, though they're weaker than her true self. So, she asks that Kazuya needs to use his head and figure out when it's best to use each one. She tells him not to hold back in any case if the situation calls for using her, but her words leave Kazuya speechless. When she asks what's on his mind, he eventually says that she's just as important to him as the battle itself, so he doesn't want to see her get hurt. He promises to protect her and win, which leaves her flustered and blushing redder than a tomato. She gets furious to hear that, and grabs his precious jewels, telling him to stop trying to act cool. That night, before sleeping, Kiriha praises Kazuya for his hard work for the past week, and suggests that while she sleeps, he can go ahead and get freaky with her if he wants. However, when Kiriha has fallen asleep, she makes it hard for Kazuya to sleep. Then, when Kazuya does sleep, he dreams of Kanaka, who laughs at him for being Kiriha's punching bag. He doesn't understand why Kiriha treats him so roughly, and Kanaka informs him that Kiriha, his object spirit, has always protected him and the wielders before him, so it made her very protective. Kanaka adds that Kiriha is also a sweetheart who, when she gets rizzed up by Kazuya, will get easily flustered. She then teases him about being a player around girls and shows pictures of him getting freaky with all the girls around him. It causes all the girls to pop up next to him and start tempting him for some plot fun. Kazuya begs Kanaka to knock it off, but she tells her that since it's his dream, the girls appear because of his own desires. So Kazuya tries to make them disappear, and accidentally changes them into sweaty dudes. Seeing how vanilla he is, Kanaka suggests to Kazuya that he should start experimenting with the girls by bumping bellies and make them gobble his glizzy. But to her surprise, Kazuya expresses how he likes his current living situation where everyone is happy around him and he doesn't want things to change. Just then, the sun starts rising, and Kanaka tells him that she needs to go. Kazuya thanks her as the previous Malison cleaner, but still can't quite understand the connection between her and him. She explains that the memory of her being his mother has been sealed, which stops him from knowing the truth. But it'll return in time, so until then, she'll be waiting. Kazuya wakes up suddenly from the dream, shaken. The next morning, he and Kiriha prepare for their battle against Sunao and Kotsu. They link themselves to the water dolls, and while Kukuri explains the rules, they hype themselves up with a few words in their heads. For Sunao, she reminds herself of how much anger she holds to know that a weak bum like Kazuya is now the successor to Kanak, which makes her want to prove to him that she's better than him. For Kotsu, she doesn't want to lose another battle after losing Sunao's older brother. For Kazuya, he wants to prove to everyone that he's worthy to be Kanaka's successor, and to show Sunao that treating their spirits as merely tools to use is wrong. Then, the duel begins to decide Kamioka's true Malison cleaner, and Kazuya makes the first move by creating a defensive wall using dummy weave. Sunao breaks through it easily with a sword strike, but then, Kazuya sets up another dummy weave, and as she goes in for another attack, he surprises her with an offensive move using his Obai's projection. It cracks her water doll, and the fight starts heating up. Just then, while Kukuri is watching, a Chibai version of Hanaka pops up, and she tells Kukuri that she's there to watch the show. Seeing Kazuya fight, Hanoka praises the guy for actually being competent instead of a weak scrub. As the duel goes on, Sunao starts realizing they've figured out her attack range by using a dummy weave. Kazuya then switches to a fence and forms a tangle ball, something Sunao has never seen before. Kotsu warns her to retreat, but Sunao ignores the warning. Kazuya's attack morphs into a sledgehammer mid-air and slams her to the ground, which impresses the gods watching. He follows up with a spiral weave strike, but Sunao recovers and stops his attack. They begin trading blows, Kazuya's Obai clashing against Sunao's sword. In the middle of it, Sunao realizes that she needs to pull out her big guns, and she throws one of her special moves, the empty strike, landing a hit on Kazuya and cracking his water doll. Kiriha tells Kazuya to get out of range, and as he dashes away, Sunao sends a barrage of attacks his way, pushing him to the edge. He retreats into the trees and starts firing rocks using archery weave. But Sunao dodges them all. She sends another attack his way, and Kazuya accidentally blocks it using the real Kiriha, injuring her slightly. Kiriha pulls back one of the weaker projections to conserve spiritual energy. When Sunao prepares another strike, Kazuya jumps to avoid it instead of using spiral weave. This surprises Kiriha since she expected him to block, but Kazuya refuses to do it since using the spiral weave requires 2 projections, and Kazuya would have to use the real Kiriha to pull it off. He hesitates, scared she'll get hurt. As Sunao powers up for a finishing blow, Kiriha encourages him to use whatever it takes, but Kazuya remembers his promise to protect her. In that moment, he activates a brand new technique, which stops Sunao's attack in its tracks and completely stuns her. Kazuya quickly follows up with another attack, landing a hit on Sunao and dealing more damage to her water doll. Realizing she's at risk of losing if she takes another hit, Sunao starts backing off to avoid further damage. Kazuya tries another strike using one of his projections, but Sunao slices through it and counters right away with her empty strike technique, landing a blow on him and his water doll in return. Both fighters then pause and keep their distance, knowing one wrong move could cost them the battle. They take a moment to think through their options, and Kazuya knows attacking now could leave him wide open since he only has 2 projections left. Meanwhile, Sunao realizes she can't rely on long-range attacks anymore since they won't be effective at this distance. Watching the match, Hanoka comments that the duel is almost over and that if they drag things out much longer, Kiriha will regain enough spiritual energy to restore the third projection, which would give Kazuya a bigger advantage. Kiriha advises Kazuya to stay on defense a little longer so they can win safely, but Kazuya shakes his head and refuses. He tells her that they can't really call it a victory unless they fight Sunao at her full strength. This catches Kiriha off guard, and she asks what that has to do with winning. Kazuya explains that he wants to show Sunao that her object spirits aren't just weapons, because he knows she treats Kotosu like an object instead of a partner. Without hesitation, Kazuya charges in, surprising Sunao, who instantly prepares to unleash her ultimate technique. As he gets closer, Kazuya and Kiriha suddenly merge using a technique called Divine Possession, where a spirit temporarily fuses with its user to grant them incredible strength. Now empowered, Kazuya moves with superhuman speed and engages Sunao in a rapid, close-range, intense fight. Kotsu urges Sunao to retreat, but she refuses, which costs her dearly. In the middle of the clash, Kazayag grabs her sword, channels a blast of spiritual energy through it, and breaks her sword's grip. He then unleashes his final move, which pierces through her and shatters her water doll completely. With her doll broken, Kazuya is declared the winner of the duel. He turns back to normal, and Kiriha congratulates him by smacking his rice cakes. While Kazuya's team is congratulating him, Sunao is worried about Kotsu, but Hanoka assures her that she's okay and that Sunao has to be grateful, as Kazuya could have easily broken Kotsu in half. Sunao then bows to them, and she walks away quietly. Moments later, while the others are making plans for the celebration, Kazuya collapses from the exhaustion of the battle. Back home, Kiriha discusses with Kukuri that the reason Kazuya is worn out is because of the Divine Possession, as it requires an inhuman power to activate. Kiriha informs that they have only used the Divine Possession once, without thinking of using it in battle, but Kazuya decided to use it then, feeling certain of their victory. Just then, Kasumi calls them down for dinner, and Kazuya is living the dream with having a goddess like Kukuri feeding him like a king. Kasumi feels worried about Kazuya's condition and suspects that the girls drained him dry. Seeing Kukuri caring for Kazuya, Kiriha teases her for it, and she slips by saying that she thought about playing wife to him. Kiriha then suggests that Kukuri help Kazuya with something else, and to her horror, she pulls Kukuri to the bathroom to help bathe him, because Kukuri is too embarrassed to touch his manly body. They put a blindfold on him so Kukuri could wash him. Initially, Kukuri manages to scrub his back without a problem, but when it's time to wash his front, she gets nervous seeing the golden pickle. She gathers her bravery, reminding herself how much Kazuya has taken care of them, and pulls his towel. To her amazement, the monster is in battle mode, and she washes it clean. That night, while Kukuri is asleep, Kiriha tells Kazuya that she wants to fulfill her promise and grant any wish he wants. While he's nervous, Kiriha wastes no time and gets her creamy domain expanded by Kazuya's almighty pickle. The next morning, Kukuri is in shock to see the two snuggling after a night of hot cardio. Kiriha stops her, but Kukuri asks for the details of what happened, and Kasumi joins in, also wanting to know how freaky her brother really is. Meanwhile, back at her Sunao's clan estate, Sunao gets scolded by her mother for acting rashly by attacking Kazuya, forcing him to a duel, losing the duel and damaging Kotsu. She reminds Sunao that she's the heir to their clan and next in line to inherit the family's sword school, but because of her loss, the mother declares that Sunao is no longer eligible to inherit the house or the school. Sunao protests against it, but her mother tells her that if she wants the decision reversed, she has to marry Kazuya, leaving Sunao completely stunned. Then, at school, the teacher introduces a new student to join the class, and to Kazuya's surprise, it's Kiriha, and it reminds him of their first meeting together. If you watch this anime recap until the end, comment down Spirit Clapper. If you like anime recaps like this, watch this video.